cloud. Okay, so today we are on just kind of looking at different ways to work with ranges and cells. So we've got a file to download for today. So go ahead and get that file downloaded, get it opened up, and then just take a look at this data and tell me something about it. And this is data almost exactly the way that I downloaded it from the Census Bureau. So kind of look over this data and someone say something. I don't even want to say interesting. It doesn't even have to cross the threshold of interesting, but tell me something about this data. You know, something above the threshold of it's organized into rows and columns. You know, that's good, but give me some insight here. Maybe pedestrian or mundane, go ahead. So this looks like some kind of identifier. You can kind of see it counts up, not, kind of monotonically here, but 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. It's kind of, moving through. Good. So that means that probably information that goes along a row are all about the same thing. If that's an identifier in the first column, then probably all the other information on that row belongs to the same entity, whatever that entity may be. Okay, what else? We're off to a good start. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, wow, you're going into this. Yeah, good. So yeah, this is census. These are census numbers. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but yeah, you're right. 0 is the whole United States. Good. What else? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, they are the county identifiers. Yep, that's right. So what we're seeing here is a particular county. Here is actually the state of Alabama. This is the alphabetically first county in Alabama, and so forth. So somewhere down here, we switch over to Arizona, Alaska, Arkansas, and so forth. All right, give me something more. Now, suppose your boss said, Smithers, make some sense of this report and get back to me. What would you say to him? You got to get Tableau out. Just drop it into Tableau. It'll tell you everything. That's all we got. Counties, census, yeah. Okay, so now you're looking here and you're saying, okay, it looks like we can get some information off this first row where we could say, here's age, something, maybe that's population. I don't know what sex means in this context, but sounds like what we have here is we've got a variable. So all these, actually, you can probably tell what sex means here by looking at the numbers. What do we think this is? That's probably percentage of male versus percentage of female. I'm not sure which way it goes. We'll have to find that out. So yeah, this is the data. This is the census data from, what is it, 2000, the 2010? This might be the 2010 census. And so maybe it's the 2000 census, I'm not sure. So all the numbers that we have in a particular column are measurements of the same thing. All the numbers we have in a particular row are measurements about the same county or state or nation. So it looks pretty good. So what would you say? Is this data pretty easy to work with in its format or pretty hard to work with? It'd be pretty difficult to work with. In fact, if we start looking at different tabs, we can come over here and we can see we've got a data dictionary here where we can map those different, here's that one we're looking at. So sex 255208 is resident population, total females percent. This is estimate for 2008. So this is data that I probably downloaded in 2008. So it's based off the year 2000 census. And so here we have the names of all the variables that have this little identifier here. The next column over, we've got the names of the counties. So we should be able to find Gov County in here. Oops. There's Gov County, Kansas, 20063. And actually the one thing that I have done to make our lives a little bit nicer here is I have added this column that joins the state and the county into one column. But other than that, this data is just the way it came from. Then I guess some of these have flags. It's like a footnote if there's something. So here's footnote 7. And then those, I guess number 7 tells you value greater than 0, but less than half a unit of the measurement. So shown, so tiny little value there. Some footnotes and then text for the footnotes and so forth. We don't worry about those too much. So let's suppose that what your task is to be able to say, listen, I've got to be able to let a user pick an arbitrary set of counties and be able to compare those two counties to each other. Ultimately, we'd like to not only be able to say, I want to pick these 3 or 4 counties and show the information, but also graph it. That'll be a future example. We'll kind of build off the example that we do today. But for today, what our goal is to be able to say, all right, somehow develop a tool here that will let someone say, okay, pick this county, pick this county, pick this county, and then organize the data so they can look at that and compare them across these dimensions side by side. So are we ready to do it? Let's go ahead and do it. Let's start off just by creating a new sheet. And I'm going to put this sheet in the first position. I'm going to call it compare. And I think rather than dynamically bringing in the names of the variables here from column B on my data dictionary table, I am going to just paste those in. So I've got a new sheet here, and in column 1, I've got what was in column B from the data dictionary, which is the names of all those, the names of all the variables. And this then will be our kind of the sheet that we work on. So the idea is I'd like to be able to put Gov County here and Utah County here and Salt Lake County here, and then show those numbers side by side across from the name of the variable, so I can see, oh, there's the name of the variable, and there's the values for the 3 counties that I've selected. All right. Oh, by the way, we've got Sam in class today, so TA. So if you've got kind of getting stuck on the code, raise your hand and maybe I don't know, raise up 2 fingers, a little peace sign, and I'll just send it to you. I'll see that, send the TA up to you. So how are we going to do it? What's going to be our next step? We want some way for the user to be able to pick a county or to indicate the county they want the information from. There's lots of ways that we could do it. How should we do it? Any thoughts on how we might go about saying, okay, this is the county that the user wants? In the back, go ahead. Okay, so we could put up probably an input box, would be put up a input box and let the user kind of type something in. So that's one way to choose something. The problem, anytime you let the user type something in, they're going to type it wrong. And now for us to figure out what did they mean when they typed it wrong is going to be kind of onerous. So that would work. I'm looking for something maybe a little bit more user-friendly. So what do you mean by a list? Oh, drop down list. Okay, so these are just drop down the list, and there's a choice. The values that the legal values are listed there. I like it. How are we going to do that? What do you know how to make a list drop down like that? What's it called? Yeah, you can do it with data validation. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's build that in cell A1. So scale of 0 to 5, show me how comfortable you are with data validation already in your life. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. If you're voting, you're a 5 or a 2. A couple of 2s. Okay, so let's take a look at it. So I'm going to come here into A1, and I'm going to say, what we're trying to say here is that we're not going to let the user type any old thing into A1, where it's got to pass some kind of validation rule. And so I'm going to do data validation on a data tab. I'm going to come to where it says data validation. So it's in this group called data tools. And with my cell that I want to put the data validation on, I'll have that selected. Open up data validation. And now, the default is allow any value. I don't want that. I want a list, pick from a list. So I'm setting allow here to be the list. And now it wants to know where the source of this list is coming from. And so I'm going to select that and just go pull that off my county name sheet. That's actually the whole reason that I created column D. So I'll just select column D, And I think that even though it's got a lot of blank ones at the end, I think that's okay. Yeah, so it's just going to be the ones that have data in it. So now the user can drop down and pick a county, or presumably they could type something in there if they really wanted to type. Can we? So I got to get all the way to gov, comma, KS. I thought it was just gov space KS. Maybe there's 2 spaces in there. Anyway, we won't do a whole lot of typing here. We're just going to pick it off the list. So now this cell simply won't let the user put in something that's not from the list. Okay, that's kind of slick. So now our task is going to be to take whatever the user's gotten here and bring in all of the right data and lay it right in here. Let's start off just by getting the right, let's go ahead and, why don't we put like the state name here, and then we'll put the county name underneath. So it'll be like Utah and then Salt Lake, and then it'll start the numbers. All right, any thoughts on how we're going to convert this, like the actual value from column D of our county names sheet? How are we going to take that in? Actually, now go bring in the right data. Yes. Okay, so kind of similar to what we did when we're trying to work with find the right data on a web query. We could do a find. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that? I like it. So I'm just going to, I probably don't need to do the copy on this part because I don't think we've kind of moved on from just trying to record a macro and modify it. Now we kind of want to write this from scratch. But the thing I don't know how to do real well is, well, the truth is I've done it enough that I know how to do it. But the thing I don't expect you to know how to do real well so far is to say, how do I do the search? How to do that find? So the code we're looking for is pretty short. So feel free to record along with me and copy it, or you'll just be able to type what I end up with here shortly. Either way you want to do that, but I'm just going to come to my developer tab. Maybe I'll start off, so I don't get too much required. I'll start off over here in my county names sheet. Yeah, I'll just copy one of these. And I'll record now, record a macro. That's great. And I will just do a find, Control F, looking for that value. And I will say close. I think that will select that field and stop recording. Let's see what it recorded. Should have a module 1 now. Okay, so that's the statement that we're dealing with. The last time we saw this statement, we just kind of looked at it and said, great, it's selecting something, let's move on. But now let's spend a little time with it. Why don't I go ahead and rename this macro instead of calling it macro 1, or if you didn't copy that, if you didn't do that, you're just typing this along. It's going to be a lot less to type things up there by the time we get there. But why don't we just go ahead and call this get data. Okay, now ultimately, this find is going to refer to what? We've got that dot activate happening after it. So that's a method, but it's a method of what kind of object? What class of object is that activate a method of? What do you think that find is actually returning? It can be returning to, could be returning a reference to a chart. It could be returning a reference to a workbook. It could be returning a reference to a range. It could be returning a reference to a worksheet. What do you think it's returning a reference to? Yeah, a cell. And the class that a cell belongs to is a range. And so this is a range. It's going to be a range class that we're So this is the activate method of the range class. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and make myself a variable. I'm going to call it found cell. And I'm going to declare that as a range variable, as range. Now, in recording this find statement, it actually activated that. I don't really want to activate it. I don't even necessarily want that sheet to necessarily even be the active sheet. But I just want to be able to go and find out what row that's on. Like, what do I want to find out? I need to get, oh, what I'm after is this number. And so everything up to here is going to evaluate to the reference to an object. That's why, a range object specifically, that's why I can activate it afterwards. So let me just get rid of everything before the .activate. And I want to bind whatever range this finds. It's going to be a reference to an object. I want to bind that onto my found cell range, my found cell variable. So I'm going to say set found cell equal to this. Now, we're going to need the what, but I'm going to accept the defaults on all the rest of these. Well, not all the rest of these. After cell, I'm not going to try to go after anything, just I'll leave that blank. Look in formulas. I'm going to get rid of this one. Leave the comma. Next one here, look at. In fact, I'm going to delete everything except the XL part. What does this mean? XL, look at XL part. Those of you who are, done a lot of searching in Excel, when you do Control F, there's some different settings that you can do there. What do you think this one's talking about when it said look at XL part? When I'm over here and I press Control F, if I look at my options here, I can match entire cell contents. I can match it by case. I can look in for, there's lots of settings that I can do here. And those settings are all specified in that search statement. And so here where it says match entire contents of cell, that's what this one is. So this was XL part. And I don't want part. I want XL whole here. By the way, this word here, XL whole, is just a constant. We didn't really talk about constants on the day that we were supposed to talk about variables and constants. Someone tell me what a variable is. It's kind of two things that make up a variable. A variable is, it's a named location in memory, right? So it's a place in memory that I can refer to by name, that I can put a value, and I can read that value out, change the value that's there and everything. A constant is exactly the same as a variable. Exactly the same as a variable, except once it gets its value, you're not allowed to change it. That's why it's called constant. So it's a named location in memory that has a value. You can set the value, and then once you've set it, you can only read it after that. And there are a bunch of variables that are, or a bunch of constants that are built in to VBA or into Excel, and this is one of them. And so when they were figuring out how to make this language work, they said, listen, what we're really after is, we just need to know, are they searching for looking for a match in the whole cell or just a part of the cell? And so they came up with these constants, names for values. And I think for this to run, I've got to make this into a comment. So I can come up here to my immediate window and say, I can just kind of type in here, XL whole. That's one. It would be exactly the same as me putting one there. When they wrote this function, this find method, they said, all right, if you put a one here, that's going to search for the whole thing. If you put a XL part, if you put a 2 there, it means just search for it anywhere in the cell. And then they said, you know what? It's kind of tough to remember what the 1 means and what the 2 means. So they made constants that were names for those values, a location in memory that's got a name where they put a 1 or a 2 to make the code more readable. So we could look at this and we go, oh, okay, we're looking for the whole value in the whole cell. Everything else in this, I don't care about. I wouldn't mind doing match case, but so I'm just going to get rid of everything to those closed parentheses. And then my what, I don't think we've talked about this yet. Sometimes you'll see this what colon equals. There's two ways that I can specify the values that I want to send to a function. One is positionally, that I want to send to, in this case, a method, just in their order, make sure they go in the right order. But if I've got a whole list of like 20 possibilities that I could put, I only want to specify one of them and the defaults are fine for the rest, then I can use the names. Which way do you like the name? Which way do you like it better? Do you like it with just the position or do you like it spelled out with the name? So let's look. So we could do this. And that says the first one, which is what we're searching for, is going to be whatever we put here. And then the next one, we're like, well, we don't care what that is. The next one, we don't care what that was. Then the next one is what it's going to search in. And so we're specifying the value there. So we can do it this way, or, oh, please let my undo go back far enough. Yeah, there we go. Or we could say, I only want to specify two things: what to search for and what to look at. And so by using the names of the parameters here, we're then saying, I don't really care about the positioning, doesn't matter. I don't have to leave the blanks in there for the ones that I'm skipping. I can just go by, just say the names of the parameters that we're going to use. Which way do you like better? Who says, I like with the names better? Who says, no, just the positions is better? About half and half. I usually like positions because it usually means less typing. And as you all know, the less I type, the better it is for everybody. So, but we'll go ahead and do it this way today. Now, what do we want to look for? I don't want to all the time look for Clark, Kansas. We want to look for what? Or how do we know, how do we tell it what to look for? Whatever is in A1 of our compare sheet. Now, let's go ahead and just assume, and it will be a good assumption by the time we get to the end of the day, but let's just assume that our active sheet is going to be this compare sheet. So if I just do a bare reference to a cell, it'll assume that it's on this sheet. So how do I refer to this cell? Lots of ways to do it. And that's actually kind of what we're examining here today. Here's one of the ways that I almost never think of to refer to a bare cell. Let me just show it to you here. In square brackets, you can just say the cell that you want. A range, let's see, value. And so if it's a fixed reference that you don't have to change within your code, you can't, once you do this, you're saying this is hard coded in the code, you can't change it with a variable or anything, that's just what it is. So let's go ahead and do that here. So instead of having this hard coded, we'll plug in A1.value. So that is one way to refer to a range. We'll see some others as we're going through. Good. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of get rid of the rest of the code here. So we've got just a couple of lines. And let me just go ahead and I'm going to print off what found cell is. So if this goes well, this will return a reference to a cell. That cell will get, that object will be bound onto our range variable, and I can use that to tell me where I found it. So I'll go ahead and run this. Tells me it found it in the address A1. Excellent. But I don't want to look on this sheet. So this is telling me, by the way, what is this collection here? Cells.find. Normally, when we use cells, we're going after a particular cell, aren't we? Cells 1, 1, address. Let's see, what's the last column, row column? So if I put 26 here, that should be in column Z. But if I just say cells without referring to, actually, telling it which cell I'm interested in, it's just going to say, oh, that's a reference to all of the cells. It's a reference to all the cells. You're looking at all the cells, but on what sheet? What sheet am I are we talking about here? It's the active sheet. Now, my active sheet is going to be compare, but I have to go find the information off of my county names sheet. So let me just stretch this open a bit and find out. I've got a sheet over here called, so it's called county names, and it actually has a code name called county. So you can see in parentheses what it shows on the tab. The way I refer to it through code is with this name right here. So that's kind of nice. So now I can say, instead of just active sheet cells, I'm going to say counties. Dot cells. So now it's talking about all the cells on the county sheet. And the truth is, I can narrow this down even more because I know that I'm only interested in column D. So instead of say looking through all the cells on that sheet for the value, I'm going to look for what's in column D. So columns 4. So that's going to be a reference to the entire column D. I come in here and just say columns 4.address. That will give me the address to that particular range. So this is pretty good now. I'm not looking over the whole sheet. I'm limiting it to a particular column. I'm going to be looking for, whoops, I don't want part, I want whole here. So it's going to try to find the whole text. The truth is, I'm not that worried about whole versus part here. Do I expect to find one county, comma, state that's a subset of another? I don't think so. Well, I don't know. I guess if I had two counties that were similar in name in the same state, where one was a little bit shorter than the other one and happened to be the last part of the word, we could find it accidentally. So yeah, I think I'm not familiar enough with the 3,000 or so counties in the nation to know if that ever happens. So I'm a lot more comfortable saying it's got to be a complete whole match here. All right. Now actually, that will give me that, but now let's do this. Want to keep track of the row that we found this on. So let me prepare another variable here. This will be a long integer. Oops. So I'm going to call it, I'll just call it the row as a long integer. Actually, my favorite name for a variable that I'm referring to the row is Henry David. Henry David, the row. Yeah. Not that many jokes here, folks. You got to take what you can get. The row. All right. So now, after I have found the cell, I'm just going to bind the row onto, what would I put right here to be able to just get the row number that it found the cell on? Any thoughts? Found cell.row, yeah. So a range, if it has just one cell in it, ACTIV cell, I can ask for the address, or I can ask for the column, or I can ask for the row. And so the row is going to be found cell dot row. Now we are pretty confident that we're going to find the value that the user selected. Why are we so confident that we're going to find the value that the user selected? That's right. This is exactly where our data validation comes from, so it has to be here. But just because this is our first time really taking a close look at this find method, I do want to introduce you to how could you tell if it found it? So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say if found cell is nothing. Is allows you to compare two objects and find out if they're, or two references to an object and find out if they're pointing at exactly the same thing. I think that's a fair description of it. If I said active cell is D905. So it's probably a little more complex than that, but this is the way we do it. If, when we first make this range, it's equivalent to a special object called nothing. So nothing is just an object, it's sitting there in memory. It's the only object that has neither properties nor methods. And it's what, when you make a new object variable, it's pointing to this kind of empty object called nothing. And I can tell if it's still pointing at nothing by asking if it is nothing. This will be false if it is bound onto a range. But if this failed, it will still be bound onto that nothing object. And so this means the find did not find a cell. And so we could do something here. I don't know, maybe put a message box. Cell not, county not found. This is terrible catastrophe, so that's critical. And then we'll say exit sub. I'm not expecting to ever hit this code, right? Because the user has to choose it from the list, and it's the very list. We're looking back in the list that defined the data validation. But if the user took off the data validation, typed something else in, this would be nice. We'll put up a message box, and then we're getting out of this sub procedure because we're not able to do anything. We didn't find we can't get the data. We don't even know which county they're talking about. Question in the back. Exactly right. Yeah, here's another constant. It's just going to be some numeric value. What is VB critical? 16. This would be exactly the same as if I put a 16 here. But VB critical is what, puts a little red X on the box and makes it whatever sound it's meant to say when you have a critical error. Show me how comfortable you are with the notion of a constant where you have a name for a value. Just 5 is like I totally got it. 1 is, I'm a little really hazy on this. There's a variable that you can't change the value. And there's a bunch of these that are predefined part of Excel. And when the macro recorder records, it uses the constant names as often as it can. Okay, so now we have found whatever. Oh, hey, there's an Allen, Kansas too. There's a Gov, Kansas, and an Allen, Kansas. Is that true? Huh, that's pretty good. I never knew that part. All right, so now that we have found the county that the user has chosen, what's going to be our next step? Ultimately, what we've got to do is we've got to come to our data set. We've got to get all the numbers that they were referring to here, and we've got to, on that row, and we've got to put them into a column right here. So what do you think our next step should be now that we've found the row? Yep. Okay, so it may be that our next step is take this county number and then go do another lookup over here in our data set in just this column to find where that county number is. I like it. There's a simpler way because of the way this data is organized. And if we're to look at this, what we would see is this goes in order. These are in numerical order, they're sorted. 0, 1000, 1001, 1003. If I come to my county names, 0, 1000, 1001, 1003, they're in the same order. Because they're in the same order, what can I do? I can just go to the same row. Now it's a little bit different because there's no header row here. And there is a header row in our data, so we'll have to offset by 1. So let's just do this. Let's see, this one has no header, so it'll be a little bit higher. So why don't we just say the row is whichever one we found, and we'll plus 1 onto it. So now we know the row that has the data on our data sheet. By the way, in everything we've done here, have we yet changed what the active sheet is? No. In fact, it's better when you're writing your code, if you can avoid changing the active sheet, that's good. Why is it good to avoid changing the active sheet? We talked about this? Yeah, going back and forth between the sheets takes a little bit of time. In fact, it takes, in computer lingo, it takes quite a bit of time. If you were going to spend the most money you possibly could do on a computer, what would that computer be designed to do? I mean, I don't mean like some scientific application, but I mean just if you're going to say, I need a new computer, I'm going to get the most expensive one I can, what would that be for? Well, it's going to be for speed. Gaming, it's going to be for gaming. What makes a good gaming machine? It's got a lot of memory, it's got a fast processor, but there's something about gaming machine that really makes them expensive, that really is the characteristic of what a good gaming machine is. What is it? Say it again. Graphics card. And when we say graphics card, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase the frame rate of these games, right? We want, in fact, how many frames do we want? Yeah, if you've got 30 frames a second, which is like motion picture, that's pretty good. But gamers want more than 30 frames a second. Usually what they're probably aiming for is like 120 frames a second, which is crazy. That means completely redrawing the screen 120 times every second. That's difficult, which means that if we've got hardware that can actually do that, it's expensive. Your hardware probably isn't going to do that all that fast. You're probably not going to get 120 frames a second on whatever you have, because those are expensive machines that can do that. So the point is that it takes time to re-render the screen. So if you can avoid re-rendering the screen, that is a plus in your code. It's going to run faster. Okay. So we now know the row. We've gone through this. We've got the row that the data are on. So what would you do? If you were just doing this by hand, how would you get, let's see, data set. In fact, let's just go ahead and go. See, we were on Allen, Kansas. Let's use Allen, Kansas. No, let's use Gov. Okay, so row 937 should be Gov County. So let's assume that I've gotten back here to row 937. Yeah, and that's 20063. So this is Gov County. If we were bringing Gov County in, what would we do? How would you bring those numbers over? You've got a row here that you've got to put into a column on the other side. Yeah, do a copy and transpose. Oh, I'm trying to think if I know how to do that well enough. I don't. I think I'm gonna have to record it. So I'm just gonna record myself doing it. This code is gonna be pretty simple to type, so you can type it if you want to or record it. So I'm referring to this particular range. In fact, I may just, I think we'll refer to not the whole column, but do Control-Shift-Right arrow. So I've got just the data I'm interested in. And we record myself copying and doing a paste transpose to see how it does it. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back to the compare sheet and paste transpose here. Got those numbers, and that's right. So there's the county. Oops, let me stop recording. There's the county code and all the rest of these. Now these numbers now have the context of the full label here. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. So what it did was it said copy, and then it did a paste special with transpose here. Excellent. Okay, so let me go ahead and refer to that particular cell. So now that I have the address here in the row, I want to copy the right range. Whew. So the sheet that we're after is our data set sheet, and it actually has the code name of data. So I can refer to it directly by its code name. So I will say data dot cells, row number, the row, column number 1. All right, this refers to one of the cells that I'm after. Now, I want to get all that contiguous data. And it happens that I know a little bit about this data set. There are no blank cells in this whole data set. So I can safely refer to the first column in that set and do a control right arrow to be able to refer to that last one. Have we talked about the end method yet, or is this going to be our first time? It's going to be our first time. So let me record myself doing that. I'm just going to record myself so we can see what it does. So record macro, control right arrow, stop recording. That was the statement that I just recorded. It says from wherever I am, so some starting cell, in this case, the one that was selected, it's going to call a method called end, and it's going to give it a constant. That's a great constant, -4161. I'm glad we have a name for that number. And I'm going to type in -4161. So that number tells this method kind of how to do its selection. It's going to go end to the right. By the way, incidentally, the reason this is called end, back before you were born, before the control key was invented, we used to do all kinds of stuff without the control key. How did you live? It was tough. Let me tell you, it was hard. But it turns out I can select that rightmost number based on the contiguous data with a 2 keystroke sequence, one finger at a time. I'm going to hit the end key, and then I'm going to hit the right arrow key. And that's going to do the same thing as a control right arrow. So end right arrow does the same thing as control right arrow. It's not like not hold the end and hit the right arrow, but it's 2 separate keystrokes. That's where the name of this comes from. And so this is end, and then the direction is to the right, and we're selecting. Okay. So now that's going to give me, so let's do this. Instead of selecting it, go ahead and just do this up here in the immediate window. So whenever you record stuff, it selects. We don't really want to select it. We just want to refer to it. So instead of selecting that cell, I just want to print the address of that cell. I'll come back over here, put myself on A1, and then execute this line. It'll tell me, oh yeah, if you were to be on A1 and hit end right or control right arrow, then that would take you to whatever column that is, column CE, row number 1. But did we change which cell was active to do that? No, we just referred to it. A1 is still active. And so from the cell I'm talking about, I'm going to refer to that cell without ever activating. That's good. I don't want to activate a cell unless I really need to activate it. I'm just going to go pull the data off of it, refer to it, get the data, and bring it out. Okay. So that's going to be the other cell that I need to be able to get that full range. And so this is looking at the data sheet on the row that we calculated, column 1. And if I was to put dot end XL to right, that would be the other column. Now, it turns out there's another way I can refer to a range where instead of just putting a string in here to identify A1, I can put 2 references to different cells. Actually, I can do 2 strings. So if I say range and give it 2 strings that it can figure out which cells I'm talking about, it goes, oh, that's a multi-cell range that starts in A1, ends in B2. So that's A1 colon B2 is the address that you're talking about. But I can also put a reference to, not a string, but a reference to a range. Active cell. Because my active cell is A1, that should give me the same, value. And I think that'll even work backwards. If I put the active cell there. Yeah, so now that my active cell is down here in C7, this range that takes 2 arguments will give me the range for everything between it. Okay, so now I've got all the pieces I need to be able to copy that set of contiguous data. So here is XL to right. That's my second cell. So I'm going to say range. Okay, so again, I'm giving 2 arguments. The first one is the one end of this range, this multi-cell contiguous range that I'm talking about. And then here is referring to the other one. And then I just want to tell that to copy. So we're now telling it copy we figured out which row has the data. We're going to tell it to copy that data because I think that was the first thing. Yeah, copy that. And then ultimately somewhere we want to do this paste special. So we'll go ahead and copy this. Let's just figure out where we want to paste it. So we've just done the copy here. That's on the data sheet. And did I actually specify this? I'm not sure I did. Where's my copy? Did I overwrite it? Oh, yeah. Here it is. The copy is down here. I wanted to paste that below the copy. Here we go. That's where I meant to paste. Yeah, so even though I'm not on, so we haven't done anything to change the active sheet. So we're still going to have the compare sheet will be our active sheet. I can refer to this range even on a sheet that's not active. That's okay because I'm specifying which sheet that first cell is on. I'm specifying the sheet the second cell is on. And so we can refer to it without ever selecting it. So now all I want to do is put that in the right place to paste. And that's going to be in B, over here on my compare sheet. B3 is where I want to paste that data. So instead of selection, I will just say range B3 on the active sheet, paste special. And the truth is, all I care about is transpose equal to true. The rest of these defaults will be fine. So that should do the paste. This should copy and then do the paste transpose into B3. Oh, hey, that's pretty good. I think that'll do it. So we've got Saline, Kansas here. Go ahead and delete the numbers out of B3. I think I can run this and that should pull in those numbers for Kansas. I'd also like to put the names of the, I think we started off to do that and I forgot to do it. So we'll want to put in Saline, Kansas there. Let me just kind of quickly take a look and see if that really is. So I'll copy the ANSI code, come back over to my data set, search for that. There it is on row 990. Come back to county names, look for it here. And yeah, there it is, 989, one less, Saline, Kansas. So it looks like we're getting the right data and we're bringing the data over. I also want to bring in the name of the county and the name of the state. So that's on my counties. So the name of the state is in C, the name of the county is in B. So right where we're putting that in B3, maybe I'll just do these just before. So, and we're just gonna do a couple of different ways that we can refer to it. So let me go ahead and do B1 is gonna be our state name dot value is going to be equal to, now my counties, yeah, so I've got, it's called counties. Counties dot cells. Row number, the row, it's actually going to be the row -1 because the name, remember we added one to it here to be able to refer to the data sheet. So when I'm looking at it on the county name sheet, it'll be -1. That should be that row column. Now cells can take a string for the second one to refer to the column by string. So column C has the state name. You want the value there. Just because we're playing with kind of different ways to refer to cells, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do one that's a little bit, it's going to seem a little bit strange here. But it's valid syntax. And sometimes the macro recorder records things similar to this. B1 dot something is going to be equal to whatever's in column 2 here. So same row, but just to reinforce that our cells can take 2 integers, I'll put column 2 here. So of course I could put B2 here. And that would put those values in. Let me go ahead and run that, and then I'm going to come back and show you what I was about to do on this one. So I'll run that, and then, oh, carry not found because it's assuming that we're on this sheet when we run it. Okay, so we've got in Kansas and Saline here. So let's look at this other one, then we'll put it in the code, even though it'll seem like a strange thing to do. I can say, let's look at a particular cell, say B3. Now I can put after that, I can put a reference to another sheet. Let me put here and say .range A1. That is crazy. That's a crazy line. What is that? What cell is that going to refer to? What's that going to print? Is it going to print B3 or is it going to print A1? Whoops, it's going to print nothing because A1 needs to be a string argument here. Normally, in fact, let me change this so it's the same syntax. Which object is this range method a method of? So some kind of object, I'm saying range B3, it's going to refer to cell B3. But what object do you think that is? What object is the range method a method of? Is it a workbook? Is it a worksheet? Is it a chart? Is it a shape? Is it a range? What is it? If I don't specify in front, the Excel interpreter goes, oh, you must mean the active sheet. So this is going to be identical to active sheet. So this method is a method of a sheet object. What kind of object does this method return? This is going to identify something, and it's going to kind of hand it back and say, okay, I found it, here it is. What kind of object will it give you? Will it be a chart? What's that? It's not a value. If I was referring to it without telling it like which property to use, it would assume value, but here it understands. Not a string. Let me run just that part. So I'm going to refer to an object, and then I'm going to call the select method. And we'll see that that has selected B3. It's kind of narrow, but there's B3. So I'm now calling the select method on whatever object this identifies. So what do you think? What kind of object is it returning? It's returning a range. That's why when I say select, it selects a range. It's a single cell range, but it's a range. Okay, so this is kind of an important thing. So this method range is the range method of the worksheet class. Right? I'm saying, oh, you've got a worksheet on this side, and now you're calling this method called range. But this part evaluates to be a range. So when I look at the range method here, it's a range method of what class? The thing I'm trying to point out here is that these two methods have the same name. They are totally different code. This is the range method of a worksheet class. The range method of a worksheet class returns a range. So this must be the range method of a range class. Coincidentally, it has the same, well, probably by intention, but it has the same name, but it's totally different code. When I call the range method of a worksheet class and I give it an address, it's a relative address. It's an absolute address. It says there's a cell B3, that's the one we're talking about. But when I call the range method of the range class, it says pretend, just pretend that the cell that I'm being called on is the upper left-hand corner of the worksheet, that this is A1. If this were A1, right, if that were the very uppermost part of the worksheet, what cell would A1 be? It'd be that one right here. So this is actually going to return the address of B3. But if I said, well, let's go to A2. So if that was the upper left-hand corner, A2 would be which one? B4. Which means that I could say, kind of using a different notation here for the same thing, I could say B3 dot A2 dot address. And that should give me B4. I might not be able to refer to these using this shorthand notation. Let me just drop in this range A2 there. Yeah, so it looks like I can't do those two brackets in a row. That's weird. And the reason that it's so strange is because you're looking at these two and you think it's the same code, but it's not. This is an absolute reference. This is a relative reference. The macro recorder records this. You saw it in the stuff we did with the web query. Because then the whole point is that I could do a multi-cell range here, like to D2. And so that says from this cell, offset a little bit more and return that particular specific range. So I could say B1 dot range to go just down one here again would be A2. And that will still put that information right here in B1 and B2. I don't know what they were thinking when they made that. They thought that was a good idea. It's pretty confusing even after years of me working with this. I always got to think really carefully about it. Okay, but that's a different way to refer to ranges. And unfortunately, the macro recorder records it that way quite often. All right. Oh, we've got less than 15 minutes and we've only got one coming in here. Let's go ahead and put a button on this. Actually, let's do this. What I'd like to do, and we could put a button so that you select the state and then run the code. But I'm going to introduce you to something new here. And we'll spend a little more time on this when we start using about forms, when we start working with user forms here in a few weeks. But it turns out that so far, all the code that we've written, we've said, all right, we want to run this code, run that code. There's some activity where we said the user's going to run this code. Maybe it was pressing a hotkey to run the code, or maybe it was like choosing it off the list of macros, run this code. But now what I'd like to do is I would like to tell Excel, listen, just watch until something specific happens. And when something specific happens, run the code. And the specific thing that I'd like it to watch for is when cell A1 of our compare sheet changes. When the value changes there, that's when I want to run the code. So you choose a different state, I want to run the code immediately. To do that, we're going to use these modules up here that have been with us since day one that we've never talked about. So up here, we've got the module one that we're working with down here. And you might have looked up over here and you said, oh, look, these are all different worksheets. These are not worksheets. These are references to the modules that are built into those worksheets. Every single worksheet has a module that's a part of it. And those modules that are part of a worksheet are wired up to be able to say, all right, I'm going to watch for something to happen on this worksheet. So I'm going to come to my compare sheet, double click it, and then let's take a look at that. We've also kind of ignored these drop-down lists at the top, but now we're going to take a look at it. So what I would like to do is I would like to do something when something happens on this worksheet. So instead of general, I'll change this first one to worksheet. And now this is now the activity that it's looking for. So it's looking for the selection to change on the worksheet that the code is built into. This code, this will be strange. Let me go ahead and put this in a debug.print. This code will execute every time the selection changes on this worksheet. And you'll notice that it's passing in a target as a range. It's going to be passing in a value to me. So let me just print the target's address. Now, every time I select a cell, every time I change the selection, that code is executing. Kind of neat, huh? I don't want this to change when someone selects, and so I'm going to choose a different event over here. So instead of selection change, I want to say change. This is when the actual value changes. So now, go ahead and move this code up to this one. So now on this worksheet, which one are we on? We're on the compare worksheet, sheet one. Anytime any cell changes, we're going to print the address. I'll come over here and put a new value into C5 here. And that just printed C5. Right? It's not doing it when I select something, but when I change the value, that code is executed. So, and what I want this to do is I want this to go run my get data function, my get data sub procedure. But I only want it when the address is A1. So I'm going to say if target.address is equal to, and remember, it actually returns in capitals with these dollar signs. So I'm going to have to put in here $A, $1. Then I want to call get data. Is that how I named it? Underscore? Yeah, it's called get data. So this block of code, no parentheses. This block of code This block of code here is going to execute every time a value changes on the sheet, but it will only call the get data subprocedure when this condition is true. So if I change this now from Saline, Kansas to Scott, Kansas, it should execute that and bring that data in. Bringing the data for Sherman, Kansas, Thomas, Kansas, and so forth. If you're a little bit mystified about this part where we have when something changes on the worksheet and executing that, it's okay. We're just kind of introducing it today. We'll spend more time on it in the semester and some different examples. Okay, we got 7 minutes. And so far, we're only bringing in one state. We're overwriting. All right, so what are we going to have to do to our code to get it to bring in the right data? I mean, to instead of writing on top of it, to not write on top. Ooh. Think about that and I'm just fearful. I'm referring to specific columns all over the place here. Any thoughts? We could say, listen, the next time we insert, we're going to figure out where the next column is. Column C. And then the next time we got to figure out, oh, no, now we're going in column D. And try to keep track of that or kind of read the worksheet to see where it is. And that would then require us to kind of go through and update. Somehow we're referring to all these cells differently. Or what we could do is say, listen, every time we insert, why don't we just insert something in column B? Why don't we just say columns before we start writing, and here's where we start writing right here. Columns 2.insert. And we could record ourselves doing that, and that's the code that it would generate for doing an insert. Now, before it starts writing anything, it's going to insert space, going to push everything over and insert space for that to come in. So now if I pick a different one, C-O-L, oh, U-M-N-S, columns. So it did it, just kind of searched over. Choose another one. Oh boy, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Just insert column. Only thing I don't really like at this point is that it's too wide. And why is it so wide? That's just the way that insert works, is that it's going to be, it takes the width of the column to the left of what you're inserting. Well, fortunately, we've got another one. In fact, after we've put all the data in, let's just go ahead and do this. We're going to do another way to refer to the whole column. I can say a particular cell in that column, so like B1, dot entire column. E-N-T-I-R-E-C-O-L-U-M-N. That's refer to the whole column. And then there's an attribute or a method called autofit. Let's try range B1 dot entire column. I thought it was entire column. The entire column property of a range, entire column property. Oh, darn it. I've been working in JavaScript a lot lately. Thank you. And this should work this way as well. Thank you. So now that should do the insert and then auto fit the column to bring it back. So we go ahead and delete these out. Choose a different one. Now it's coming in as a reasonable size. Okay, that's our example for today. Now we're doing it's pretty good. I mean, just kind of take a look at it. It's pretty good. Now I can compare Boyle, Bath, and Thomas. Well, Boyle and Bath, Kentucky with Thomas, Kansas. It's pretty easy for me to kind of compare these side by side and say, oh, yeah, was the one that we were looking at that was percentage of females, total females percent. I can compare those numbers across those three pretty easily. So here, in just like a little bit more than an hour, we turned this worksheet that was pretty difficult to work with to now something that's pretty easy to work with. It's a nice little tool to be able to look at data with. Later, when we start working about charts, we're going to build on this example and actually make it build a chart for those each time we do it as well. Okay, any questions? Yeah, in the back. Oh yeah, the question is, how can you change that? And the answer is, with it selected here, you can change the name right here in the properties window. So choose view properties if you don't have that window showing, but you can change it right here. Sometimes it requires you to close Excel or close the workbook, open it again before it reads, but usually it's available straight away. All right, thanks for coming, folks. Class dismissed. I will see you on Wednesday.